There was a woman I once heard about, a therapist actually, someone who spent her entire career helping other people heal. She was warm in her sessions, patient, endlessly kind to the people who walked through her door carrying their grief, their shame, their broken places. And then one day, her colleague, a dear friend, sat across from her at lunch and said something very quietly. She said, "You know, I've watched you for years. You are the most compassionate person I've ever seen with every single person who comes to you for help. And I wonder, have you ever once turned that same compassion toward yourself?" The therapist went completely still, and then, very slowly, her eyes filled with tears, because she realized in all those years of learning how to hold other people's pain gently like a small bird in cupped hands, she had never once held her own pain that way, not even for a moment. She had been everyone's soft landing. And her own inner world, that was a place she treated like a courtroom. Evidence presented, verdict delivered, sentence carried out, every single day. Maybe you know that feeling. Maybe right now, even as you listen to this, there's a quiet voice somewhere inside you that is not kind, that catalogs your failures with the precision of a very dedicated accountant, that replays the embarrassing moment from 3 years ago at 2 in the morning, that looks at you and says, not quite in words, but in a feeling, you are too much, or not enough, or somehow fundamentally wrong in a way that can't quite be fixed. If any part of that sounds familiar, then this is for you. And I want to start by saying something that might sound almost too simple, but I mean it completely. You deserve the same kindness you give to everyone else, not as a reward, not after you've fixed yourself, not once you've gotten your act together, lost the weight, stopped procrastinating, figured out your purpose, healed your anxiety, become the version of yourself you think you're supposed to be right now. As you are, in this moment, with all of your mess and your contradictions and your beautiful, exhausting humanness, you deserve kindness now? Now, I know what some of you are thinking, because I've thought it too. You're thinking, but if I'm kind to myself, won't I just stop trying? Won't I use it as an excuse to stay exactly where I am? Won't self-compassion just be a fancy name for giving up? And I want to sit with that question for a moment, because it's a real one. It makes complete sense that we'd be afraid of that. Most of us were taught somewhere along the way that the way you become better is through pressure, through criticism, through holding yourself to a very high, very harsh standard and never ever letting yourself off the hook. We were taught that gentleness was weakness, that self-criticism was discipline, that the voice that says you're not good enough was actually helping you. But here's what's quietly fascinating and a little heartbreaking. The research, and there's quite a lot of it now, actually shows the opposite. People who treat themselves with compassion when they fail, they try harder the next time. They're more resilient. They're less likely to give up. They're more honest about their mistakes because they don't have to defend themselves from the onslaught of their own inner critic. Self-compassion doesn't make you soft. It makes you steady. And I think deep down some part of you already knows this. Because think about the people in your life you admire most. The ones who seem genuinely grounded. The ones who can make a mistake and acknowledge it without completely falling apart. The ones who keep showing up, keep trying, keep caring, even when things are hard. I'd be willing to bet that those people are not the harshest critics of themselves. They are, in some quiet way, on their own side. Now, here's where I want to bring in something that has helped me enormously and that I find myself coming back to again and again. There's a teaching that says, you are the sky, everything else is weather. Sit with that for a moment. You are the sky. The storms, the clouds, the gray days, the brilliant sunsets, the thunder, the rain, the fog, all of that is weather. It passes through, it changes, it comes and goes. But the sky doesn't become the storm. The sky doesn't turn into the cloud. The sky holds all of it without being destroyed by any of it. And this is what we lose sight of, I think, when we're being very unkind to ourselves. We get confused. We mistake the weather for the sky. We think, I'm having an anxious day, therefore I am broken. I made a mistake, therefore I am a failure. I'm feeling lost, therefore there is something fundamentally wrong with me. But what if instead, and I know this takes practice, gentle practice, what if instead you could say, there is anxiety moving through me right now. There is shame visiting. There is this heavy feeling of not enoughness passing through. And underneath all of it, I am still here. The sky is still here. I haven't disappeared. This isn't about pretending the storm isn't happening. The storm is real. The pain is real. We don't want to float above it in some kind of spiritual bypass, waving cheerfully at our suffering from a great distance. That's not it at all. It's more like we're learning to be present with the storm without deciding that the storm is the final truth about us. Because it isn't. It never was. Now let me tell you something about what self-compassion actually looks like in practice, because I think it gets misunderstood. People hear, be kind to yourself, and they imagine something very soft and vague, like taking a bubble bath and saying positive affirmations in the mirror. And if that helps you, wonderful, truly. But that's not quite what I'm pointing at. Real self-compassion sometimes feels uncomfortable. It's not always warm and cozy. Sometimes it feels like sitting very still with something you really don't want to feel. It feels like saying to yourself, okay, I'm here. I'm not going to run from this. I'm not going to distract myself or numb myself or turn this into a 500-item to-do list. I'm just going to be here with this. That takes courage. That is not weakness. And here's what's remarkable. When you stop fighting the pain, when you stop trying to push it away or argue with it or shame yourself into feeling better, it often begins to soften. Not because you fixed it, not because you solved it, but because you finally stopped treating it like an enemy. There's a phrase I love very much, the only way out is through. And what I've found, and what I think you'll find too if you try this even a little, is that the way through is always softer than we expected. The thing we were so afraid to feel turns out to be survivable. The emotion we were running from, it's intense, yes, but it doesn't kill us. We're still here on the other side. I want to share something with you now about the particular cruelty of the inner critic, because I think it's important to name it clearly. The inner critic sounds wise. That's the tricky part. It sounds like it's trying to help. It speaks in the voice of reason, of standards, of high expectations. It says things like, I'm only pointing this out so you can improve. I'm just being realistic. Someone has to hold you accountable. But watch what the inner critic actually does. Does it help you improve? Does it make you feel motivated and clear? Or does it leave you feeling small, ashamed, paralyzed, and exhausted? If it's the second one, and for most of us it is, then that voice is not your ally. It is not wisdom. It is not your higher self. It is, in many cases, a very old pattern. Something learned, perhaps in childhood, perhaps from a critical parent or a harsh environment, perhaps from a culture that decided your worth was conditional on your performance. And here's the radical part. Here's where it gets interesting. We don't have to believe everything we think. That voice in your head, it is not the final authority on who you are. It is not an oracle. It is not God. It is a habit of mind. And habits can change, not overnight, not by forcing it, but slowly, gently, through repeated acts of small kindness toward yourself, through noticing when the voice is speaking, through being curious about it instead of immediately agreeing with it, through asking, is this true? Is this actually helping me? Would I say this to someone I love? That last question is one I want to stay with for a moment. Think of someone you love very much, a close friend, a child, a sibling, anyone. Think of them making the same mistake you made, feeling the same shame you're feeling, struggling with the same thing you struggle with. What would you say to them? I'm guessing you would not say what your inner critic says to you. I'm guessing you would say something much softer. Something like, hey, you're trying, this is hard. You're still here and that matters. Let's figure this out together. So, why not that? Why not that for you? The only honest answer most of us can give is because somewhere, somehow, I decided I was the exception. I decided that the kindness I give so freely to everyone else, I needed to earn before I could receive it myself. And I haven't earned it yet. I haven't become good enough yet. I haven't finished paying the debt yet. And that moment of recognition, when you see that clearly, that you have made yourself the one exception to your own compassion, that moment can be a kind of opening. It can be the beginning of something, not a grand transformation overnight, not a sudden healing of every wound, just a beginning. A small, sincere beginning, which brings me to something I hold very dear, the idea of beginning again. No matter how many times you've been harsh with yourself, no matter how many times you've spiraled into self-criticism, or talked yourself down, or decided you were beyond hope, or spent hours in the mental courtroom, you can always begin again. Beginning again is not failure. Beginning again is the practice. It's like, imagine you're learning to play the piano, and every time your fingers hit the wrong key, you stood up from the bench and said, "That's it, I'm clearly hopeless, I'll never be able to do this, I am fundamentally incapable." You'd never learn anything. You'd spend all your time in the drama of the wrong note and none of your time actually playing. But if instead you just gently put your hands back on the keys and tried again and again and again with a sort of warm, patient amusement at the imperfect process of learning, you would get somewhere, eventually, beautifully. That's beginning again. That's the whole thing. Now, let me offer you some very gentle, very practical things you can actually try, not because you need to fix yourself, but because you deserve a little tending to, the way a garden deserves watering, not because it's failing, but because that's what helps it grow. The first thing, and this is the simplest, is just noticing. The next time you catch yourself being harsh, see if you can just notice it, not judge it, not try to fix it immediately. Just, oh, there's the critic. Hello, you're very loud today. Notice it the way you'd notice weather. There's a storm blowing through. Okay, I see you. That tiny moment of awareness, just that, is the beginning of choice. Because once you can see the pattern, even briefly, you are no longer completely inside it. You have a little bit of space, and in that space, something else becomes possible. The second thing is, try speaking to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you love. Not in a forced, fake, cheerful way, not with relentless positivity that doesn't feel true, but in a sincere, gentle way. When you make a mistake, try saying, "Okay, that happened. That was hard. What do I actually need right now? Not what do I deserve? Not how do I punish myself so this never happens again, but what do I actually need? Maybe it's rest, maybe it's to talk to someone, maybe it's just a glass of water and 5 minutes outside." Start small. Ask the question, see what comes. The third thing, and this one I love, is what some people call a hand on the heart. It sounds a little strange, I know. But when you're in the middle of a very hard moment, when the shame is loud, or the grief is heavy, or the self-criticism is running its familiar loops, try gently placing one hand over your heart. Feel the warmth, feel the slight pressure, feel the aliveness there, and say something like, "This is a moment of suffering. This is hard. I am not alone in feeling this way." Many, many people have sat in exactly this place because they have. Whatever you're feeling right now, the loneliness, the inadequacy, the quiet fear that you're somehow wrong at the core, you are not the only one who has felt that. You are not the only one sitting with that. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone else is in this same exact place. You are completely, heartbreakingly human, and there is something in that when you really let it in that is strangely comforting. You are not broken in a way no one else has ever been broken. You're just human, beautifully, terribly, lovably human. The fourth thing, and this is perhaps the most challenging, so take it slowly, is learning to stay with what you're feeling, even when every instinct in you wants to run. When the discomfort rises, reach for your phone, start scrolling, eat something you didn't really want, pick a fight, get very busy, make a plan, do anything but just sit with this. See if just for a minute you can stay, set a timer if that helps, 1 minute. Just be with what is here. Let it be here without immediately trying to change it. You will not be swallowed. I promise you that. You will get to the other side of 1 minute. And that minute, practiced again and again, gradually becomes a quiet kind of strength. The capacity to be with yourself, to not abandon yourself in the hard moments. That is one of the most profound gifts you can ever give yourself. I want to close with something. All of this, the self-compassion, the gentleness, the beginning again, it isn't about becoming a different person. It isn't about achieving some enlightened state where you never criticize yourself, never feel ashamed, never have a difficult day. It's about learning to be a good friend to yourself. That's it, the whole thing, in its entirety. You already know how to be a good friend. You do it maybe for other people every day. You show up, you listen, you offer comfort. You don't abandon people when they're struggling. You tell them the truth with kindness. You believe in them even when they can't quite believe in themselves. Just do that for you too. Just include yourself in the circle of your own care. That's all. Not instead of caring for others. Not by becoming selfish or pulling away from the world, but by recognizing that you are also a person who deserves care, that your struggles matter too, that your inner life is worth tending to, that you are not the exception to the rule of human kindness. You're not. You never were. The sky holds all kinds of weather, and the sky is still beautiful, still vast, still here. And so are you. You're still here. That matters more than you know. If something in this touched you today, if something felt true or landed somewhere soft, maybe share it with one person who might need it too. And if you're moved to, leave a word in the comments, not to perform anything, just to say, I heard this, I was here, I'm trying. That's enough. You're enough. And I'll see you next time.